When the apocalypse hit, the first thing the man did after being reborn was borrow loan shark money from a gang boss. His girlfriend saw it and said he had gone crazy. What she didn't know was that under his careful setup, she had already become the one stuck with the death, because the man knew a terrifying disaster was about to arrive. When that time came, the world would be scorched by extreme heat. Living things would mutate and supplies would become desperately scarce. People would stop at nothing just to get their hands on a little food and a few survival supplies. And in that kind of world, having supplies meant having absolute wealth. Even billionaires who once had everything would end up groveling for a single ham sausage. In his previous life, he did everything he could to protect his girlfriend through the apocalypse. But for the sake of some other bastard, she sold him off like livestock. In the end, not even a whole corpse was left of him. So in this life, Chun Xiao went to the boss of the Dahai gang, planning to borrow a huge sum of money and prepare for the coming apocalypse. Brother Lu questioned him, asking if he even understood what it meant to borrow 5 million from him. That kind of loan came with a notoriously brutal interest rate. Of course, he knew, but as long as he could get the money, a higher rate didn't matter. Then Brother Lu told him to sign an IOU for 7 million and put up collateral of equal value. He took out the property deed he had prepared in advance. This house alone was more than enough to use as collateral. But Brother Lu had clearly already pegged him as easy prey that he said that with just this house, there was no way he could borrow 5 million. So the deal probably wasn't happening. He pretended to panic and started begging, even lowering the amount himself to 4 million. Brother Lu was thrilled inside. He had this young gambling addict completely figured out, so he pushed the amount down again to 3.5 million. He accepted that price without a second thought. Brother Lu did a math point. 3 months later, he would have to pay back 4,900,000.0 that if he had no money, the house would be taken as payment. The loan would be released within 3 days. Hearing that, his expression changed and he said he needed the money right now. After some negotiation, he successfully got the 3,500,000.0 loan. Sure enough, there were still plenty of good people in this world. Add a little interest and they'd hand over the money on the spot. In 1 month, the apocalypse would arrive anyway. So who was going to repay this lousy loan? Now that he'd been reborn with time still left before the disaster, he had more than enough time to make his moves in advance. Suddenly, he noticed a burst of noisy commotion behind him that wasn't the legendary overpriced ice cream trap. In his previous life, he could never bring himself to buy one, yet had bought them for that bitch Lu Wanqing several times. Furious, he stormed into the ice cream shop and ordered 10 of every kind they had. The girl beside him looked completely stunned. Even the clerk was taken aback. After all, this shop only sold premium ice cream and 10 of each variety would probably cost more than 20,000. Judging from the way he was dressed, he didn't look like someone with money. Once the girl recovered, she looked at him with open disdain. She clearly looked down on how poor he seemed and even said that if he could really afford it, she'd kneel and bow to him. Hearing that, he got interested and asked if she really meant it. The girl couldn't stand the way he was acting and her face turned red on the spot. She declared that once she said something, she wouldn't take it back. A way out had been handed to her, but since she refused to take it, that was her problem. So he showed the clerk the balance in his phone account. She was so shocked that she immediately called out the manager who came over to apologize to him. After that, he bought out the shop's entire stock. That way, even after the apocalypse arrived, he could stay home and eat ice cream. Then he transferred a 300,000 deposit to manager Fei, gave him the delivery address, and generously treated everyone in the shop to ice cream. As for the rude girl, she had no choice but to bow to him in humiliation. He left the shop in style, found a place to try the so-called ice cream assassin, and its taste and price really did live up to the name. Right after that, he activated his spatial ability that IT allowed anything stored inside to remain in its current state forever. With that ability, any ingredient could be kept at peak freshness. What he hadn't expected was that even his ability had returned with him after rebirth. Originally, abilities only began awakening one after another after the apocalyptic disaster started. There was still a lot he needed to do next. But in this peaceful era, just the thought of building a safe house and getting weapons was already giving him a headache. Just then, Lu Wanqing suddenly called him. After his parents died, she had appeared like some kind of savior and the foolish him had thought she was the light in his life. In the end, all she wanted was the small inheritance his parents had left behind. Qin Xiao. My mom already said it that if you want to marry me, that fully paid big apartment downtown has to be under my name, and you also need to give $880,000 in bride price. That I know it's not cheap, but it's all for a future home together. She even suggested that he should just sell his family's house since it was old anyway. In the end, she even wanted to sell off the ancestral also. She could get herself a large apartment in the city center. After the apocalypse hit, Chun Xiao did everything he could to keep her safe, but just to latch onto a stronger backer, she sold them off like livestock. Young master, he's the one I was talking about. That haven't you been looking for special materials? He absolutely fits your requirements. After that, Chun Xiao was taken away and subjected to brutal experiments. And in the end, not even a whole corpse was left of him. Since she came knocking on his door herself this time, Chun Xiao was definitely going to settle this score with her properly. It turned out she had gone out with friends and accidentally lost a gold necklace she really liked. The moment Chun Xiao heard that, he understood exactly what she was hinting at. But he was no longer the pathetic simp from past life. He quickly came up with a way to deal with her and said he wouldn't just buy her a new one. He'd buy 10 and let her switch between them. That instantly left Lu Wanqing stunned. She couldn't help wondering when Chun Xiao had suddenly become so generous as for him. He lied and said he'd gotten lucky lately and made a small profit from cryptocurrency. Lu Wanqing didn't believe him at first and suspected he had fallen for some kind of scam. But Chun Xiao didn't care at all. He simply told her to wait and see what his next round of returns looked like. Small moves like this were nowhere near enough for him. This time, Chun Xiao planned to go big. He was going to borrow a sum of money as capital and increase his investment, but that loan needed a witness. So he asked Lu Wanqing to help him with that, and promised her that once everything worked out, he'd give her a handling fee equal to 5% of the loan amount. But right then, an old man suddenly walked into the bathroom. Lu Wanqing instinctively put away her phone, and the old man demanded to know why she had been taking so long. Lu Wanqing had no choice but to calm her sugar daddy down first and tell him she'd be done in a second. At the same time, she was already doing the math in her head. It don't matter how she looked at it. This deal with Chun Xiao would earn her more than sticking with that sugar daddy, and based on what she knew about him, there was no way he would trick her. Just like that, Lu Wanqing agreed to act as Chun Xiao's guarantor. And Chun Xiao couldn't help looking forward to the show that was about to begin. After that, Chun Xiao found a well-known architectural designer and told him to turn the residence into a fortress within 1 month. The windows had to be bulletproof, the laminated glass had to be fitted with invisible security mesh, and the walls had to be reinforced in a 3-meter-thick bulletproof outer walls with seismic resistance above intensity 8. The roof needed transparent solar panels and an independent power system to guarantee electricity, along with an air purification and filtration system to keep toxic gas from getting in from outside. It also needed a self-sustaining ecosystem, including a 72-hour oxygen supply and water circulation system, plus blast-proof doors, an access control system, and dual verification through biometrics and mechanical locks. In short, the place had to be transformed within 1 month into an impact-resistant house with a life support system. The designer was completely dumbfounded after hearing all that and suspected Chun Xiao had watched too many apocalyptic sci-fi movies. Chun Xiao originally thought the designer might not be able to take this job, but he clearly remembered that the man's resume said he had designed shelters for top-tier billionaires before. He was supposed to be a true defense expert. In reality, the designer was already overjoyed. He was thinking about how to squeeze a huge payday out of this rich Chiuni in front of him, and Chun Xiao had already expected that much. So he pulled out his phone and showed the balance, putting down a 1 million deposit on the spot while letting the designer name the final price. The designer's pupils shook on the spot. He clearly hadn't expected Chun Xiao to really be this loaded. Still, Chun Xiao cared a lot about materials and build quality, and he insisted that everything had to pass inspection. The designer immediately guaranteed that what he built would be rock solid. Now that the fortress issue was handled, food, medicine, and daily necessities would be easy enough. But in the apocalypse, the most dangerous thing wasn't the disaster itself. That IT was human nature after order collapsed. Cold weapons could be picked up from a hardware store, but firearms and other weapons that could deal a truly lethal blow were much harder to get. Even so, there was always a way around a problem, and Chun Xiao quickly found a special channel. The strange part was that the other side chose a very crowded place for the meetup. While he was still looking around for the cellar, a young woman suddenly ran toward him while being chased by several men. From the look of it, she seemed to have cheated someone in this territory. With tears in her eyes, the girl begged Chun Xiao to save her. But the moment he got a clear look at her face, he froze. Why was a Yu in a place like this? Back in middle school, she had been a brilliant goddess of the class, the kind of girl countless boys admired from afar. And now, she was being openly humiliated by a bunch of thugs. The lead thug pointed at Chun Xiao and warned him not to stick his nose where it didn't belong. Then he grabbed Li Yu by the hair and demanded that she hand over the money. One of the lackeys behind him immediately got dirty ideas and suggested that if they really couldn't get the money, there were other ways she could pay it back. At that point, Chun Xiao couldn't stand it anymore and shouted at them to let her go. The three thugs instantly frowned. One of the lackeys lunged at him and said he was going to cripple Chun Xiao trying to play hero. Chun Xiao frowned and ducked low, narrowly slipping past the thug's straight punch. In the same motion, he twisted in and snapped the guy's wrist. The lackey screamed again and again from the pain. But Chen Xiao gave him no time to recover. One heavy punch sent him flying several yards away. Unexpectedly, that single move unlocked a system he hadn't even gotten in his previous life. The lead thug was completely shaken by Chun Xiao's strength, so he grabbed Lu Yu and used her as a shield, warning him not to do anything reckless. But right then, a man suddenly rushed in with a brick and smashed the thug unconscious with one hit. Apparently, he couldn't stand men who bullied girls. Once the other lackey snapped out of it, he grabbed a bat and charged over to avenge his boss. Meanwhile, Chun Xiao went straight for the bald guy who was left. The man who had shown up out of nowhere was clearly the real deal. In just a couple of moves, he dropped the lackey with the stick. Chun Xiao naturally wasn't about to fall behind either, and he unleashed a flurry of punches straight into the bald guy's face. Realizing they were completely outmatched, the remaining lackeys quickly ran for it while Chun Xiao racked up quite a few negative emotion points. Only after the danger had passed did Li Yu finally breathe easy. Though she never expected a run into Chun Xiao here. After a quick thank you, Chun Xiao helped her up and found a shirt to drape over her shoulders. After that, Li Yu left because she had something to do. While the guy who had fought beside him, impressed by what Chen Xiao had done, took the initiative to introduce himself. Name's Moodsong. And you? Chun Xiao looked at him and said, "So you're Moodsong? Perfect, that I'm the one who arranged to meet you." Moodsong froze for a second, surprised by the coincidence. Then, almost ceremonially, he threw out a corny street-style passphrase, "The eagle flies at midnight." Chin shout and play along all that he shot back. "Yeah. And you sound like a complete idiot." Only after collecting enough negative emotion points did he finally give the real contact code and explained that he'd just been messing around to break the ice. Moodsong didn't take offense, and before long, he led Chun Xiao to the real transaction point for this deal. The advantage of this model was that it was sturdy and reliable, but the downside was that ammo was limited, so every shot had to count. Seeing that Chun Xiao had real skills and was also pretty interesting as a person, Moodsong gave him a friendship price and treated it like making a new friend. During the exchange, Moodsong kept watching the way Chun Xiao handled the weapon. One look was enough for him to tell Chun Xiao knew exactly what he was doing, which made him feel a lot better about the deal. Chun Xiao casually asked whether buying this thing came with any extras like a suppressor, a warranty card, or maybe even a free box of ammo. Moodsong froze on the spot. He had already made it clear that he was giving Chun Xiao a friendship price, and something like this could sell for double on the black market with no problem. Yet Chun Xiao still had the nerve to ask for a warranty and freebies. Moodsong's negative emotion points instantly shot through the roof. Seeing the timing was perfect, Chun Xiao said he had only been asking casually, then transferred the money to the designated account at the price Moodsong had quoted. Now the weapons and supplies were taken care of. The only thing left was getting revenge on Lu Wanqing, the woman who had betrayed him in his previous life. And at that very moment, she had already arrived at the hotel he booked. Chun Xiao stepped forward and gently wrapped an arm around her waist. Lu Wanqing first whined to him in a spoiled tone, saying her legs were sore from waiting so long. Then she changed the subject and asked whether there was any risk involved. Chun Xiao told her this was just a formality, and besides, he spoiled her too much to ever let anything happen to Lu Wanqing. Thought it over for a moment and felt that what he said made sense. After all, Chun Xiao had once nearly gone to sell blood just to buy her a handbag. In her eyes, he was still obsessed with pleasing her, so there was no way he would dare set her up. With that, she no longer had any hesitation and decisively signed her name on the agreement. She thought she was only signing on as a guarantor, never realizing that the moment her signature hit the page, shoulders. Brother Lu kept smiling on the surface and praised her again and again for being so straightforward, but deep down, he was already calculating how to squeeze every last bit of value out of her once she could no longer repay the money. Maybe it was because Chun Xiao had already seen through Lu Wanqing for who she really was. But when she signed, he didn't feel the slightest bit of pity or hesitation. Her greed was about to pay off the remaining balance on his safe house. After everything was done, Chen Xiao went to inspect his fortress, and designer patted his chest and told him not to worry in the slightest. He said every material in the house had been reinforced to the highest possible standard, and the actual results did meet Chen Xiao's expectations. Satisfied, Chen Xiao paid off the remaining balance on the spot. The extreme heat phase had already begun to creep in, and the news was gradually being replaced by one extreme heat warning after another. The rising temperature was only the beginning of this disaster, yet that change alone was already enough to completely throw normal human life into chaos. Even staying indoors felt like being trapped inside an airtight sauna, so hot and stuffy that people could barely breathe. On the streets, price gouging was everywhere. Merchants took advantage of the heat wave, loudly claiming that temperatures would keep rising next week, lying that supplies were running short and that water and electricity would soon be restricted, all to pressure passers-by into stockpiling. Some even claimed they were selling the last batch available. In their eyes, this unbearable heat disaster that was tormenting countless people was nothing more than a golden chance to make a fortune that if they didn't cash in hard, they felt like they'd be the ones losing out. The broadcast did attract quite a few customers, but the prices were enough to make them back off. The moment Li Defu saw that two pretty girls had walked in, he immediately put on an extra friendly face. He not only offered to cut up some melon for them to sample first, but also promised them a 20% discount if they bought 2 plus a free pack of tissues, and even said they could come back at night to enjoy the store's air conditioning if it got too hot. The two girls only wanted to buy one, but Li Defu kept pressuring them, hinting that no one knew how long this heat would last or whether there would still be stock tomorrow. But when other customers merely asked whether the water could be a little cheaper, he snapped right back at them without any politeness, repeating that it was a small business and there would be absolutely no bargaining. Chen Xiao watched the whole thing unfold and couldn't help clicking his tongue at Li Defu. It reminded him of the last time he had come to the store that a product had fallen to the floor. And when Chen Xiao instinctively bent down to pick it up, Li Defu had grabbed him by the collar and publicly accused him of being a thief. Chen Xiao tried to explain himself, but Li Defu refused to listen at all. He had even called over the neighbors to stand around and condemn him, leaving a wound on Chen Xiao's young heart that was hard to heal. But in this life, Chen Xiao was going to make him understand what real suffering felt like. Chen Xiao's eyes landed on a ridiculously overpriced bag of chips on the shelf. He walked over and deliberately raised his voice, demanding to know why the price was so outrageous. The moment Li Defu heard that familiar voice, he visibly froze. But once he turned around and realized it was Chen Xiao, his face instantly darkened. He then stormed over, snatched the chips right out of Chen Xiao's hand, and started chewing him away with open disgust. He even snarled that if Chen Xiao couldn't afford it, he shouldn't touch things at random because if anything got damaged, there was no way he could pay for it. But Chen Xiao was no longer the timid person he had been his past life. Instead, he smirked and reminded Boss Li that with so many treasures stockpiled here, he'd better be careful not to get cleaned out overnight. That instantly set Li Defu off. His face flushed red as he shouted at Chen Xiao, accusing him of cursing the store and even threatened to beat him up, saying the heat must have fried his brain. Chen Xiao, however, acted completely relaxed and told him to calm down. Then he casually asked whether he had been suffering lately from insomnia, vivid dreams, weak knees and back, night sweats, and constant fatigue. Li Defu, who had been ready to keep cursing, suddenly froze. The more he thought about it, the more he realized he actually did have every one of those symptoms. His anger instantly faded and he began muttering to himself, even wondering whether something was wrong with the feng shui in his warehouse. Chen Xiao then pretended to help him loosen up his arms and legs, making it look like he was examining him. While doing that, he also took the chance to smack him a few times nice and hard. Once he had vented enough, Chen Xiao coldly dropped his diagnosis, classic kidney deficiency. Only then did Li Defu finally realize that Chen Xiao had been playing him the whole time. Unfortunately for him, Chen Xiao had already had his fun. After paying for the candy, he turned and walked away like nothing had happened because the real main event was coming that night. Negative emotion points could expand his spatial ability. And now, Chen Xiao was about to use the negative emotion points he had harvested from Li Defu to enlarge that space even further. Then he would empty out every last bit of inventory in Li Defu's warehouse. Early the next morning, Li Defu sensed from a distance that something was off about the warehouse. He rushed inside to check, only to freeze in disbelief. Every single item he had stockpiled in the store was gone without a trace. His face turned ashen. His eyes went wide with rage, and he stood there in the empty warehouse filled with utter disbelief, fury, and despair. Chun Xiao sat in front of the surveillance monitors watching the emotion index shoot higher and higher. He smugly took a sip of cola, his eyes landing on Li Defu in the warehouse with open amusement.
Li Defu ed completely fallen apart.
He ran around the warehouse crying, then finally dropped to his knees, arms spread wide, drowning in helpless rage and despair. The commotion quickly drew over nearby residents, staring at the now empty warehouse. Everyone was shocked, and many started worrying about where they were supposed to get daily supplies from now on. Quite a few people were also suspicious, whispering to each other that this might just be a stunt. Li Defu had staged himself to drive prices up again. But someone else said they had seen a shadow near the warehouse the night before. The moment he heard that, Li Defu shuddered, as if something had suddenly clicked in his mind. Chun Xiao was very satisfied with that wave of emotional output from Li Defu, but the real show was only just beginning. He picked up the bag of chips he had set his sights on the day before and deliberately made loud, crisp crunching sounds as he enjoyed them at a leisurely pace. The second Li Defu noticed the chips, he exploded like a lit powder keg and instantly insisted that they were part of the goods stolen from his warehouse. Just like in the previous life, he grabbed Chun Xiao by the collar. And for a brief moment old memories made Chun Xiao hesitate. But he snapped out of it almost immediately. He was no longer the same man he used to be. Chun Xiao looked at Li Defu coldly and told him that throwing his hand around was pointless. Without any evidence, all that shouting would only make him look ridiculous. Then Chun Xiao switched gears and mocked Li Defu's miserable situation, even asking whether he wanted him to donate the half-eaten bag of chips. But Li Defu showed no sign of backing down. Since Chun Xiao had cursed him yesterday and was now eating the same kind of chips, Li Defu stubbornly insisted that Chun Xiao had to be the thief, clearly hoping to squeeze something out of him to cover his loss. Chun Xiao didn't buy that act for a second and directly asked the onlooking residents to judge the matter for themselves. The scene immediately turned chaotic. Some people said plenty of other stores sold the same chips, while others pointed out that Chun Xiao had complained about the price yesterday and now the whole store had been cleaned out today. That was just a little too much of a coincidence. Chun Xiao stared at Li Defu and told him that if he didn't believe him, he was free to search his house, that if anything from Li Defu's store turned up there, Chun Xiao would pay him back tenfold. But if nothing was found, then the backup generator behind Li Defu's shop would belong to him. Without another word, Li Defu dragged Chun Xiao straight to his house. But the moment they arrived, all of Li Defu's confidence vanished. He was stunned by what he saw and immediately realized that someone from Chun Xiao's kind of background would never need to steal his goods. Right after that, he tried to slip away in embarrassment. But there was no way Chun Xiao was going to let him leave that easily, that Li Defu still owed him that generator. Too afraid to lose face in front of the neighbors, yet unwilling to give up the generator, Li Defu could only lower his head and admit he had misjudged Chun Xiao. He begged to be let off the hook. But when he falsely accused Chun Xiao before, he hadn't shown even a shred of mercy. The neighbors who had originally felt sorry for Li Defu instantly changed their attitude. They said that for someone that dishonest, getting robbed was practically karma. Humiliated and furious, Li Defu suddenly swung a punch at Chun Xiao and shouted that Chun Xiao was refusing a chance to back off gracefully. But Chun Xiao caught the punch with ease and then pinned Li Defu to the ground in one move. Racked with pain, Li Defu had no choice but to give in. Chun Xiao showed no mercy and told him to hurry up because once the temperature rose again, nobody would be able to go out. Not long after Li Defu left in humiliation, Lu Wanqing hurriedly called. She said that for the past 2 days, she had felt like several people were following her and they seemed like debt collectors on the phone. Her voice was full of panic as she brought up the signature and the stocking. Then suddenly shouted Chun Xiao's name and demanded to know why the Dahai gang was after her, asking again and again whether he had tricked her. On the surface, Chun Xiao acted hurt and kept feeding her excuses about devotion and sincerity. But inwardly, he was thinking that the Dahai gang really couldn't wait to make a move. Walking over to the fridge, he asked whether the Dahai gang already knew where she lived and whether they had said anything to her. And only then did he learn that Lu Wanqing had said something was wrong and taken side streets to shake them off. Chun Xiao told her to relax and said they had mistaken her for someone else. After that, he placed a salmon-set meal on the table. Lu Wanqing's eyes lit up instantly, and she asked Chun Xiao how he still had food like this, completely unaware that he had plenty more where that came from. Hearing that, Lu Wanqing froze for a moment. The heat wave had already lasted for days, and supplies were now mostly going to the rich. To where had Chun Xiao gotten all this from? Had he really made it big? Chun Xiao calmly took a sip of ice-cold cola, then ate a bite of salmon so tender it practically melted in his mouth. The hungry look on Lu Wanqing's face was practically written all over her expression. Watching her practically squirm with envy, Chun Xiao casually asked whether she still had enough to eat on her side. At that, Lu Wanqing stopped pretending altogether. She said she was really scared living alone and kept feeling like those people were still nearby. She leaned forward slightly, lightly tugging at the corner of her clothes. Her eyes deliberately softened as she put on a pleasing expression and asked whether she could move in with Chun Xiao for a few days and maybe use the chance to build their relationship a little. A trace of disdain flashed across Chun Xiao's face, almost too subtle to notice. Looking at how deliberately ingratiating she was acting, all he felt was that she was cheap and ridiculous. But in the next second, he put on an expression of surprise and delight and said it was too hot to go out right now, so he'd pick her up that evening when it cooled down. Then he suddenly changed the subject and brought up how she always used to say that a girl's address couldn't be shared casually, which was why she had never let him get close before. Lu Wanqing immediately acted as if she had just realized something, then casually came up with an excuse about the situation being special this time and sent over her address without hesitation. Looking at what she assumed would be Chun Xiao's overjoyed reaction, she curled her lips into a faint, almost invisible sneer and mocked him inwardly. Sure enough, Chun Xiao was still the same pathetic simp who would fall right in line the moment she gave him a little warmth. What she didn't realize was that, after receiving the address, Chun Xiao's lips curled into a cold smile as well. From that moment on, her nightmare had only just begun. The moment the call ended, Chun Xiao heard a knock at the door. When he opened it, Aunt Wang didn't even bother greeting him. She tried to squeeze into his air-conditioned room right away. "Your place is so cool. The MYSC is broken and the kids dying from the heat were neighbors. We should help each other out. Let us stay in here for a while." "Okay." Chun Xiao shoved her right back out without the slightest bit of politeness. He brought up how years ago, when his mother had been downstairs picking up empty water bottles, Aunt Wang had pointed at them and mocked them for being poor, then even called security to drive them away. The moment she heard that, Aunt Wang turned hostile and snapped. "That was ages ago. How can you still hold a grudge like this? You've got no sense of neighborly kindness at all." Chun Xiao had no interest in wasting more time arguing with her, so he shut the door on the spot. Maybe he had no warmth, but his house had air conditioning. Furious, Aunt Wang stood outside and cursed his entire bloodline from top to bottom. Inside, Chun Xiao calmly switched to the new phone card he had prepared in advance. Then he called the Dai Gang. "I already sent you Lu Wanqing's address. She lives alone. She won't be hard to find." Meanwhile, Lu Wanqing had no idea danger was closing in. All she could think about was moving into Chun Xiao's air-conditioned place and living the carefree life she thought she deserved. Just as she was about to light up and relax, a rapid knock suddenly pounded at the door, instantly breaking her rhythm. Her eyes lit up at once and a delighted smile spread across her face. But the second she opened the door, her pupils shrank in shock and she stumbled backward in terror. "Why is it you? How do you know where I live?" Brother Lu expressionlessly shoved her aside and walked straight into the room. "Miss Lu, you owe the Dihai Gang money. Time to pay up." Lu Wanqing panicked on the spot and shouted in a trembling voice. "Chun Xiao borrowed that money. He tricked me into signing it. You should be going after him." Brother Lu simply tossed out the signed agreement in black and white, and Lu Wanqing, who had still been trying to argue, instantly fell silent. He said nothing else and merely tilted his chin at the man beside him. The lackeys immediately spread out and began searching for valuables. Lu Wanqing lunged forward and desperately tried to shield her things, her voice shaking as she yelled that she was going to call Chun Xiao and that he would be here soon. Brother Lu ignored her completely and just watched coldly as his men tore through the place. In no time, everything valuable in the room had been looted and piled onto the table. Lu Wanqing stood frozen in place, her eyes full of fear and reluctance. But even if all those items were added together, they still wouldn't come close to covering the debt. Brother Lu let out a cold laugh. "My brothers didn't come all the way out here in this heat just to leave empty-handed." Hearing that, the lackeys all stood up with vicious grins and began closing in on her step by step. Lu Wanqing kept shrinking back, her voice shaking so badly she could barely get the words out. Don't come any closer." As Brother Lu and the others closed in, Lu Wanqing hurriedly threw out Chun Xiao's name like a last lifeline, saying Chun Xiao had a huge stockpile of supplies and plenty of money. Brother Lu thought it over for a moment, then gave her a chance to contact Chen Xiao. But no matter how many times she called, all she got was the automated tone, saying the call wasn't being answered. Lu Wanqing completely panicked. Her body wouldn't stop trembling as she kept muttering that Chen Xiao had to be busy and probably just hadn't heard the phone ring. She had to try to call again when Brother Lu slapped her so hard she was since sprawling. He cursed her for being stupid, saying that when Shan Xiao tricked her into signing that paper, he had never intended to pay the debt back in the first place. Lu Wanqing froze where she stood. The panic in her eyes was instantly replaced by emptiness, and even her trembling stopped. Brother Lu wasted no more words and grabbed her by the hair. Lu Wanqing gasped in pain, twisting and struggling desperately as she screamed at them to go after Chen Xiao instead, saying that Chen Xiao was the one who had what they really wanted. But in the end, Brother Lu still dragged her into the back room. Meanwhile, Chen Xiao was sitting on the sofa at home, lazily swirling a glass of red wine between his fingers. The surface of the wine reflected the mocking smile on his face, while deep down, he coldly hoped Lu Wanqing would fully enjoy the apocalypse's own special kind of hospitality. Even after collecting interest, Brother Lu still wasn't satisfied. He grabbed Lu Wanqing by the throat and forced her to reveal what valuable Chen Xiao had hidden in his house. Lu Wanqing was struggling to breathe, but she still forced herself to talk, blurting out piece by piece the details she had noticed earlier during their video call. There was obvious calculation in her tone. She clearly wanted to bait Brother Lu into turning his attention towards Chen Xiao. After hearing enough, Brother Lu suddenly flung her aside. She stumbled backward and crashed onto the bed in a miserable heap. Brother Lu bared his teeth in a vicious grin, his eyes narrowing to slits as he thought to himself at this time. He had hooked a really big fish. Brother Lu then tilted his head and gave the lackeys behind him a look. Once the group stormed off, Lu Wanqing was left alone in the dark little room. She slowly raised a hand to cover her mouth, her shoulders shaking violently as muffled sobs kept spilling out while hatred and unwillingness churned in her eyes. Just like that, the whole group barged aggressively into Chen Zhao's neighborhood. The moment Aunt Wang heard why they had come, she immediately volunteered to lead the way. She took them straight towards Qin Zhao's place while non-stop bad-mouthing him, piling on every nasty accusation she could think of. Brother Lu praised Aunt Wang for leading them well, and promised that once they got what they wanted, she wouldn't be left empty-handed. Hearing that, Aunt Wang's steps became even lighter and her face almost crumpled into a grin. She was already starting to picture Chen Xiao kneeling in front of her and begging for forgiveness. But the moment Brother Lu arrived at Chen Zhao's front door, he was dumbfounded. The defensive setup in front of him was completely outrageous. His lackeys, on the other hand, were fearless and reckless. They rolled up their sleeves and got ready to kick Sun Zhao's door in. But before they even got close, one of them was hit hard by the hidden electric grid and collapsed on his whole body, convulsing. The others immediately rushed over, cursing, trying to pull him up, only to get hit by the current the instant they touched him, one after another. They were left numb and twitching too. Standing in the back, Brother Lu was completely stunned, his face full of disbelief and frustration. Then, out of nowhere, a loudspeaker popped out and a ridiculously cheerful good luck tunes started blaring like at the same time. The electric current began pulsing stronger and weaker with rhythm. The electrocuted lackeys flailed around uncontrollably, looking exactly like backup dancers following the beat. The sizzling crackle of electricity mixed with the faint smell of roasted meat scared Brother Lu's group so badly that they stumbled backward again and again. Holding a microphone, Chen Xiao watched the whole thing in complete ease. "Well, it looks like you guys are pretty lucky. One step and you hit the security grid jackpot." The moment Brother Lu recognized Chen Zhao's voice, he immediately tried to sound tough again, shouting that a debt had to be repaid and that once Chen Zhao paid up, both sides would be even. Aunt Wang also chimed in from the side, but the filth coming out of her mouth was even worse than Brother Lu's. Looking at the ugly faces in front of him, Chen Xiao let out a cold laugh. He said flatly that his apartment alone was worth 4 million on the market, far more than that 3,500,000 loan. Besides, the debt was already under Lu Wanqing's name now, so it had absolutely nothing to do with him anymore. Brother Lu was left speechless by that response. Chen Xiao pressed the advantage and told him that a wise man knew when to back down. Since he was still in a decent mood, it would be better for everyone to walk away peacefully. If they insisted on pushing things further, he wouldn't stay this polite. After saying that, he turned the power of the electric grid up again and gave Brother Lu's lackeys a complimentary round of shock therapy. Only then did Brother Lu finally realize Chun Xiao wasn't joking at all. After throwing out a few hollow threats, he hurriedly led his men away in defeat. Aunt Wang's face instantly turned deathly pale, her eyes full of uncontrollable fear. The way she looked at Chun Xiao's house was like she was staring at some inhuman omen of disaster. The next day, temperatures shot up an exponential rate and reports from multiple areas began pouring in about people dying from the extreme heat. Chun Xiao, however, was completely unaffected. He stayed tucked away in his cool home, leisurely enjoying the stockpile of food he had prepared. But that comfort eventually stirred up the envy and resentment of the neighbors, and the residents' group chat exploded on the spot. Long-winded messages flooded the screen one after another, every line dripping with blame, bitterness, and jealousy towards Chun Xiao. He simply scrolled through the messages without changing expression, mercilessly harvesting their negative emotion points. Still, Chun Xiao wasn't that cold-hearted that he snapped a photo of the fridge packed full of supplies and posted it straight into the residents' group chat. Then he said plainly that he wasn't running a charity, that if they wanted anything, they could trade him something of equal value. But instead of feeling even a shred of gratitude, the group reacted as if he had lit a fuse. The chat instantly exploded again, and the insults they hurled at him became even uglier than before. It was so absurd that Chun Xiao actually laughed. He simply put his phone down and stopped bothering with them. If they wanted to destroy themselves, that was their problem. Just then, a system notification sounded. The negative emotion points he had gathered had finally broken past the 3,000 mark. After learning where Chun Xiao was, Brother Lu immediately brought his men and headed straight for the neighborhood without stopping for a moment. But to his surprise, the first one to get out of the car was Lu Wanqing, the same woman Brother Lu had once chased all the way home over the dead. Tuai looked like she had completely thrown everything away just to get revenge on Chincho. Brother Lu got out right after her, his sharp eyes sweeping across the rows of apartment buildings in front of him. Then he flicked a glance at Xiao Zhan beside him, who confirmed the location of Chun Xiao's home. After that, Brother Lu asked Lu Wanqing with amused curiosity whether it hurt at all now that they were about to raid the home of the man who used to be her boyfriend. Lu Wanqing sweet-talked Brother Lu and said that right now, he was the only man in her heart. The moment he heard that, Brother Lu grinned from ear to ear. Just then, several figures suddenly peeked out from the apartment hallway. They were all residents who had always held a grudge against Chun Xiao. Wearing flattering smiles, they rushed over one after another and eagerly offered to lead Brother Lu to his place. Brother Lu smiled broadly and promised that once this was over, none of them would leave empty-handed. But the moment the group started heading toward Chuanzhou's home, Brother Lu showed his true greedy nature and looted the resident supplies all along the way. Li Defu trailed behind with his neck tucked in, acting timid the whole time and not daring to say a word, forced to watch the group ransack supplies as they went. Aunt Wang couldn't hold back either and started shouting at Brother Lu at the top of her lungs. Only then did the people who had volunteered to lead the way realize just how badly they had messed up, but by then, there was no fixing it. In the end, Brother Lu led his men to Chun Xiao's door, where a whole line of black-clad thugs stood in formation, giving off an oppressive aura. Chun Xiao, however, didn't change expression at all. He simply moved a couch over to the doorway. Then he sat down on it and calmly started eating dinner, lifting his eyes a moment later to look at them with amusement and ask whether they needed something from him. Brother Lu's face darkened instantly. Forcing down his rage, he shouted viciously that if Chun Xiao obediently handed over the supplies, he'd at least leave him a whole corpse. Chun Xiao calmly wiped his mouth and replied in a cold tone, "Didn't your parents ever teach you not to interrupt someone during dinner? It's incredibly rude." Brother Lu finally lost control of his temper. With a savage wave of his arm, he signaled for the lackeys behind him to rush forward and cripple Chun Xiao. But no matter how many of them there were, they were still just ordinary people without abilities in fact, Chun Xiao didn't even need to use his powers. Physical stats alone were enough to beat the entire group into submission. But even the best fighter has to respect a blade. Just as Chun Xiao was about to use spatial severing, a tear gas canister suddenly landed right at Brother Lu and his men's feet. The gas spread almost instantly. Brother Lu didn't dare keep fighting and hurriedly fled with his men in a complete mess. Almost at the exact same moment, Chun Xiao darted backward and completely avoided the spreading gas. Right after that, a figure appeared at the corner of the street and a voice followed. "Looks like you've stirred up quite a bit of trouble. Still, I gotta admit, your skills are pretty damn solid." Chun Xiao was puzzled. What was Mu Tsang doing here? But Mutsong just fiddled with the gadget in his hand and threw out a few vague half-finished remarks. Chun Xiao couldn't be bothered to keep entertaining that nonsense. So he turned around, went back inside, and carried out a whole box of ice-cold bottled water. He casually tossed one bottle to Mutsong, then asked with a serious look why he was here at all since this clearly wasn't Mutsong's turf. Only then did Mutsong explain that Brother Lu's people had been cutting into his business lately. He had been watching Brother Lu for days, and when he saw him heading this way today, he followed behind only to discover that Chun Xiao was the actual target. As he said that, Mutsong showed a hint of amusement on his face. Supplies have been tight for a long time now, and yet you're still sitting on this much stuff. Without some kind of special channel, there's no way you pulled that off. Sun Xiao instantly went on guard. He stared at Mutsong and asked in a cold voice, "What exactly are you trying to say?" Mutsong leaned a little closer, forcing a smile as if trying to ease the tension. He explained that he meant no harm to IT, was just that Brother Lu had recently stockpiled a large amount of purified water, and he wanted to work with Chun Xiao to get his hands on it. Once the job was done, the water would be stored with Chun Xiao, while Mutsong would be responsible for figuring out how to sell like tea. I guess the temperature kept climbing. Water was bound to become real hard currency. Chun Xiao waited over in his mind and eventually agreed to work with Mutsong. But the moment he opened his mouth, he locked in a profit split. 90-10, with Chun Xiao taking 9 parts and Mutsong taking 1. Mutsong's jaw practically hit the floor and he blurted out, "Why don't you just rob me instead?" Chun Xiao didn't leave him even the slightest room to negotiate. With the system in his hands, he had zero reason to worry about supply shortages. That unshakable confidence of his ended up scaring Mutsong quite a bit. Mutsong immediately grabbed Chun Xiao's leg and begged him to loosen the split a little, saying he at least needed enough profit left to survive. Chun Xiao thought it over for a while and finally relented, changing the split to 80-20, but he added one extra condition. From now on, whenever new goods came in on Mutsong's side, Chun Xiao would get first pick and only after that could Mutsong sell the rest. Mutsong put on a wronged expression and agreed, but inside, he quietly let out a breath of relief. That kind of airtight reaction made Chun take Mutsong's negotiating ability far more seriously. In the end, he really was someone who had spent years in business. His sense of timing and limits was spot on. Once the partnership was set, Chun Xiao immediately got to work on the plan. The first step was figuring out the layout of Brother Lu's base and how his people were positioned. He quickly learned from Mutsong that inside the stronghold, anyone short on water either had to pay up or trade something valuable for it. Quite a few girls had also been taken there to provide special services for the higher-ups. Lu Wanqing was among them. And at that moment, men were openly sizing her up with predatory looks. Chun Xiao ignored her existence completely and fixed his eyes straight on the water storage area in the back. He told Mutsong that once the signal came, he should stir up chaos around the outer perimeter. Right after that, Chun jumped and dropped straight down from the rooftop. Before long, he had already disguised himself as an ordinary worker inside the base. But after only a few steps, a patrol guard stepped in front of him and harshly demanded to know who he was. Without changing expression, Chun Xiao calmly pulled out the ID he had prepared in advance and said he'd been sent by Boss Lu to check inventory in the water storage area. But the other man sneered as he walked closer, clearly not buying it. Chun Xiao immediately realized the disguise had failed, so he stopped wasting time and used spatial severing to kill him on the spot. The scream instantly alerted the nearby patrols. One of them raised his gun and opened fire at Chun Xiao without hesitation. Chun Xiao's eyes sharpened and with a single lift of his hand, he unleashed a fierce spatial slash. The invisible blade cut through the air and split the man's body cleanly in two. But the burst of gunfire had already alerted the entire patrol unit. Seeing the situation turn bad, Chun Xiao quickly slipped into a dark corner, only for a pair of hands to suddenly reach toward him. Just as he tensed up, Liu pressed a finger to her lips and signaled for him to stay quiet, then hurriedly led him to a safe spot. Chun Xiao had been focused entirely on the operation he had planned, and he never expected Liu to suddenly show up here. After pressing her for answers, he finally learned that she too had been taken by Brother Lu's man. She had been doing cleaning work around the place this whole time, and because of that, she had already figured out the layout and could lead Chun Xiao to where the water was being stored. As she said that, the two of them looked at the bucket beside them at the same time. They used it successfully to draw the patrol's attention away while the guards moved over to investigate. Liu immediately grabbed Chun Xiao and pulled him to a narrow path with no surveillance cameras. Once they reached the target area, Chun Xiao signaled for Liu Yu to find a place to hide first. Then he focused, gathering all of his spatial energy into the palm of his hand. In the next instant, he slammed his palm forward and the iron door in front of him shattered on impact, sending debris flying everywhere. The guard inside was completely dumbfounded. He roared and demanded to know who Chun Xiao was. But before he could even finish the question, Chun Xiao struck without hesitation and killed him on the spot. After an unknown amount of time, Liu Yu, still hiding in the shadows, gradually began to worry about Chun Xiao. She finally worked up the courage to peek out, only to be shaken by the smoke filling the warehouse and the chaotic glow of fire. All she could do was pick up a brick from the ground to make herself feel a little safer. Just then, a figure slowly emerged from the smoke. He didn't have time to think. She squeezed her eyes shut and hurled the brick with everything she had. But when she looked again, she realized the person standing in the smoke was Chun Xiao. He simply tossed out one calm sentence. "It's done. Let's go." Then he turned and walked away from the water storage area without looking back. After that, he sent the signal to Mutsong, who was waiting on the rooftop. The moment he got it, Mutsong let out a low laugh and muttered, "This guy really does get things done." Then he shoved forward the cart of Molotov cocktails he had prepared in advance and tipped the entire load straight into the stronghold in one motion. The spreading fire instantly drew the attention of the base's combat personnel. And with Liu Yu leading the way, Chun Xiao should have been able to get out quickly. But out of nowhere, Lu Wanqing suddenly rushed out from the shadows and threw her arms around him. In a sweet pleading voice, she begged Chun Xiao to take her with him for old time's sake. She even said that as long as he got her out of there, she would stop pursuing the matter of him using her name for the loan. Chun Xiao lowered his eyes to her tear-reddened face and thought to himself that even now, she still hadn't understood the situation at all. Lu Wanqing kept pouring out her misery without stopping, every word dripping with grievance. She even leaned in her tearful act, putting on that same seductive routine she had always relied on. But Chun Xiao acted like he hadn't seen any of it. The images of Lu Wanqing betraying him in his past life kept flashing through his mind one after another, crushing down every last shred of spare emotion. He raised his hand and slapped her straight to the ground, coldly telling her that her act was still just as pathetic as ever. Chun Xiao couldn't even be bothered to look at her again. He simply turned and told Liu Yu beside him that it was time to leave. Liu Yu looked at Lu Wanqing collapsed on the floor, clearly hesitating a little. But she didn't know the full story, so in the end, she didn't interfere. Lu Wanqing finally dropped the fake flirtatious act and stared at their backs with hatred burning in her eyes, silently swearing that she would make Chun Xiao pay. Sometime later, Brother Lu rushed to the water storage area, his mind fixed on only one thing, whether his water was still there. But the moment he looked up, he saw the words Chun Xiao had left on the wall. Rage instantly surged into his chest, and he shouted at the top of his lungs, demanding to know who had done it. Just then, Lu Wanqing staggered over and told Brother Lu that Chun Xiao was behind all of it. Then she leaned herself against him in a deliberately seductive way and started whispering made-up slander about Chun Xiao into his ear. Brother Lu flew into a rage. Then it hit him that Chun Xiao could only leave through the south gate. So he immediately ordered his men to rush there and block him off. But Chun Xiao had already prepared a special gift for him at the south gate. Seeing Brother Lu charging over from afar with a whole crowd behind him, Chun Xiao curled his lips and said mockingly, "You got here pretty fast." Brother Lu had no interest in talking, but he waved his hand and his lackeys immediately roared as they lunged at Chun Xiao. Seeing that, Chun Xiao didn't hesitate for even a second. He threw the torch into the pile of oil drums he had set up in advance. Towering flames exploded upward and instantly formed a wall of fire, completely cutting off their path. Brother Lu's eyes went bloodshot with rage. Outside the wall of flames, he jumped and cursed while screaming Chun Xiao's name. Chun Xiao stood on the other side of the firelight with a satisfied smile on his face, calmly taking in another wave of emotion points from him. Once everything was over, Chun Xiao, Liu Yu and Mutsong headed straight back to his place and threw together a celebration meal. And Mutsong hadn't even finished swallowing the juice in his mouth before blurting out, "Man, you're ruthless." Then he grinned and mocked. Brother Lu's probably so furious right now, he wants to rip the roof off his own house. Liu Yu was also deeply grateful to Chun Xiao. She said that if it hadn't been for him, she had no idea how much longer she would have been trapped in that hole. Chun Xiao just smiled and told her not to mention it. After all, they've been classmates for years. But Liu Yu shook her head, warmth shining clearly in her eyes. She said it wasn't just politeness. Chun Xiao had made her feel that there were still people in this world worth trusting. Muzong quickly picked up on a slightly romantic atmosphere and immediately joked that Chun Xiao's whole hero saves the beauty move was way too smooth. But then he changed the subject and asked how Chun Xiao had managed to clear out the entire water storage area by himself. That it was practically like watching a magic trick. Chun Xiao looked at the mountain of water buckets and paused for a moment. Then he told Muzong that, instead of asking that, he should probably start thinking about how to safely sell off that much water. The smile on Muzong's face froze instantly, and he was left speechless for a long moment. Seeing that, Chun Xiao smoothly shifted the topic and mentioned that after middle school graduation, he had barely heard any news about Liu Yu. A trace of bitterness immediately crossed Liu Yu's face, and she quietly said that something had happened at home after graduation. During that time, both of her parents had disappeared. Before Chun Xiao and Muzong could even recover from the shock, flames suddenly flared up outside the window. The three of them rushed out to look and found that the entire neighborhood had already fallen into a sea of fire. Chun Xiao quickly dragged the other two into the surveillance room where they discovered that all of it was Brother Lu's doing. Muzong slammed his fist hard against the table in fury and shouted, "Is that bastard trying to burn everyone alive?" But Chun Xiao saw through Brother Lu's plan immediately. He was clearly trying to use morality and the lives of innocent people as chains to trap Chun Xiao in a position he couldn't escape from. Too bad for him. Chun Xiao was no longer the soft-hearted fool he had been in his previous life. In a high-temperature apocalypse. There was no way he would have stupid enough not to equip his safe house with top-grade fire protection. Chun Xiao immediately activated the fire suppression system, and a mist like gel burst from several nozzles built into the outer walls of the house. It quickly formed an invisible barrier around the exterior, sealing the wall of flames firmly outside. Muzong froze on the spot, his eyes locked on that barrier. He had clearly recognized it as military-grade nanomaterial. Supplies that tightly controlled weren't just hard to get. Ordinary people usually never even got the chance to see them. Hearing that, Liu instinctively covered her mouth too, and the way she looked at Chun Xiao was filled with shock and genuine admiration. But Lu Haifeng only saw it as Chun Xiao's last desperate struggle, and he kept shouting for his men not to stop. Molotov after Molotov kept flying over like they were free. What Lu Haifeng didn't know was that Chun Xiao's fire defense gel reserves were practically inexhaustible. Even after they used up every last bottle, the white mist blocking the flames showed no sign of fading. Watching Lu Haifeng's group scramble in a panic, Chun Xiao mocked them and asked whether they wanted to come inside for a glass of ice water to cool off. Lu Haifeng's face turned livid on the spot, but then a greedy idea began to grow wildly in his mind. He wanted to take this near-perfect shelter for himself, and the neighbors he was holding hostage were the perfect leverage to force Chun Xiao's hand. Holding a burning torch like he could set everyone on fire at any second, Lu Haifeng threatened Chun Xiao to get the hell out there. Aunt Wang kept cursing at Chun Xiao, blaming him for provoking Lu Haifeng and dragging innocent people like them into mess. Muzong was furious at the sight and gritted his teeth, saying that if it came down to it, they should just rush out and fight Lu Haifeng head-on. But Chun Xiao felt nothing at all. His eyes seemed covered by cold haze because he knew perfectly well that in a world like this, mercy was the same as suicide. When Chun Xiao still refused to react, Lu Haifeng decided to start with Old Man Wang. But the moment Chun Xiao saw him, he froze for a brief second. In his previous life, when he had been at his most desperate, it was Old Man Wang who told him that as long as he was alive, there was still hope. Those words hit him like a beam of light and instantly cleared the fog from his mind. Chun Xiao immediately told Muzong to stay inside and protect Liu Yu. As for him, he stepped out the door that it was time to settle this grudge with Lu Haifeng once and for all. The moment Chun Xiao showed himself, Lu Haifeng wore the smug look of man who thought victory was already in his hands, in his mind. If Chun Xiao didn't repay the debt and didn't leave his life behind, then the hostages would never be spared. Chun Xiao only let out a quiet laugh that he had no interest in playing the martyr. He knew Lu Haifeng had built his fortune through gambling dens. He so decided to settle things with the kind of game Lu Haifeng trusted most. If Lu Haifeng won, everything Chun Xiao owned would belong to him. But if Chun Xiao won, Lu Haifeng would release every hostage and take his men out of the area for good. Lu Haifeng accepted at once and casually tossed the dice cup in front of Chun Xiao. The rules were simple and brutal. Compare the dice. 1 round. Winner takes all. Chun Xiao spotted the tampering immediately, but he didn't expose it. The outcome of this bet had never been something a few rigged dice could truly decide. He wanted Lu Haifeng to witness it with his own eyes. The trick he was so proud of was nothing but a cheap little gimmick in front of absolute power. The instant both dice cups hit the ground, Lu Haifeng quietly pressed a button hidden on the side of his cup. The scattered dice, pulled by an invisible magnetic force, began to shift and flip until each one settled neatly with the 6 facing up. Lu Haifeng raised his eyes toward Chun Xiao with a smug look as if the win was already guaranteed. What he failed to notice was the knowing smile already curling at the corner of Chun Xiao's mouth. Chun Xiao had already used his ability to slice the dice inside the cup clean in half. The numbered halves were left facing upward. The split dice lay quietly inside the cup, and their total clearly crushed the winning outcome Lu Haifeng had rigged for himself. The sight of that completely enraged Lu Haifeng, and the smugness on his face was instantly replaced by pure malice. Humiliated and furious, he yanked out a gleaming dagger and lunged straight at Chun Xiao with murder in his eyes. Chun Xiao turned aside and dodged the attack, thinking this was the perfect chance to test his new skill. The moment the thought crossed his mind, he raised his hand and threw a tear gas canister. White smoke spread through the air in an instant. Seeing that, Lu Haifeng immediately led his men charging into the haze, trying to track down Chun Xiao's position. The moment Lu Haifeng came face to face with Chun Xiao, he snatched up a rifle and started spraying bullets wildly in Chun Xiao's direction. But the gunfire only gave away their position. Chun Xiao unleashed several spatial slashes in a row, cutting down one lackey after another. When the smoke finally began to thin, Chun Xiao stepped out of the gas-filled area without a single scratch on him. Lu Haifeng still refused to give up. He convinced himself Chun Xiao had only survived the gunfire by luck, then pulled out a rocket launcher and aimed it straight at him. With a thunderous blast, the rocket came screaming in through the heat haze. Chun Xiao immediately activated spatial barrier, and an invisible wall of energy stopped it cold in mid-air. The rocket instantly split apart from the impact against the barrier. The vicious look on Lu Haifeng's face vanished, completely replaced by fear that reached all the way into his bones. His pupils shrank as he stared blankly in Chun Xiao's direction. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't understand how a human body could block a rocket. Lu Haifeng completely lost the will to resist. His mind was now racing with only one thought: how to survive this disaster. He also knew perfectly well that after provoking Chun Xiao again and again, there was no way this would end peacefully. Lu Haifeng's brain spun at full speed, and then he suddenly changed his tone completely. "Brother Chun Xiao, it's all a misunderstanding, a total misunderstanding. You and I could say we got to know each other through fighting. How about we'll make a deal?" Just as Chun Xiao was advancing on him with killing intent, Lu Haifeng put on a pleading face and started talking business instead. He said that, in the apocalypse, even a tiny infected wound could get someone killed, and he happened to have a huge stockpile of medicine. If Chun Xiao spared him, he was willing to hand over half of it. Chun Xiao deliberately lowered his voice and told him flatly that the supplies he had stockpiled were far beyond anything Lu Haifeng could imagine. In truth, he was baiting Lu Haifeng into revealing more about the medicine. Lu Haifeng took the bait exactly as expected. Desperate to make the deal happen, he spilled the location of the hidden medicine stash, adding only that the warehouse password was known to him alone. A satisfied smile slowly appeared at the corner of Chun Xiao's mouth. That was all he needed. He patted Lu Haifeng on the shoulder and said calmly, "Let's call it here for tonight that I asked for the details of our partnership. We can talk another day." Once Lu Haifeng had put some distance between himself and Chun Xiao, he immediately fled with his men in total panic. But Chun Xiao only sneered to himself. Did Lu Haifeng really think a password alone could keep him out? Even without it, Chun Xiao could still get the door open. After that, he walked over to Old Man Wang and told him everything was fine now. Having just escaped death, Old Man Wang was so grateful that he said he would even work like an ox or a horse for Chun Xiao if needed. Chun Xiao told him not to think like that and just go back, lock his door, and to get some rest. Meanwhile, Lu Haifeng's true colors showed. Deep down, he looked down on Chun Xiao completely, thinking he was just a hot-headed kid who actually believed he would share the medicine. In Lu Haifeng's mind, this was nothing more than a delaying tactic. First, he would calm the boy down, then once he tricked him out of his supplies, he could kill him at his leisure. If Chun Xiao thought he could outplay him, he was still far too green. The lackeys immediately picked up on their boss's thoughts, and one after another, they started flattering him, saying he was brilliant, and that if Chun Xiao dared go against him, he probably wouldn't survive 3 days. Still, Chun Xiao's ability to stop a rocket had left Lu Haifeng badly shaken. Turning to Pineapple Head beside him, he ordered him to dig into Chun Zhao's background over the next couple days. But before he could even finish speaking, Chun Zhao had already launched a spatial slash and cut straight through his throat. The lackeys instantly realized it was Chun Zhao's doing and were scared out of their minds. None of them even dared collect Lu Haifeng's body before turning and fleeing in every direction. Looking at Lu Haifeng's miserable corpse, Chun Zhao paused. Then he said calmly, "Boss Lu, farewell." The next day, the news released multiple emergency bulletins in a row, saying that the global heat crisis had fully spiraled out of control, several climate tipping points had already been crossed, and ecosystems were on the verge of collapse. Officials formally advised residents to make their own choice based on their circumstances, either migrate north to temporary northern shelters set up by the government or stay where they were and wait for rescue. But Xinxiao knew perfectly well that this so-called northern safe haven would soon turn into a new hell, and waiting around for rescue was nothing but a fantasy. The real nightmare had only just begun. Before long, heat-resistant mutated beasts would start devouring every last product of civilization, and the awakened humans would soon begin forming factions and slaughtering one another in the fight for resources. So what Chun Zhao wanted was not merely to defend this safe house, that he wanted to turn it into the final fortress that would keep him alive in the apocalypse. But his peaceful and comfortable days didn't last long. Before long, the neighbors' resentment started boiling over. Some of them shouted at the top of their lungs, "Look at us. We're starving out here and our homes have burned down to nothing. And what about Chun Zhao? He's hogging a fortress that big and that solid all by himself with food, water, and air conditioning inside. Why does he get that?" Some people were so enraged that they started hammering on his door yelling, "Chun Zhao, get out here. If you had help when you were supposed to, we wouldn't have ended up like this. You owe everyone an explanation." In the end, they even openly agreed that Chun Zhao's safe house had to be shared and that everyone should take turns living inside it for the sake of collective survival. Chun Zhao ignored all the shouting outside and calmly seared himself a steak inside Fortress. Once it was cooked to a rich smoky finish, he plated it neatly, added a few finishing touches, snapped a polished photo, and posted in the neighborhood group chat. The moment the picture went up, the chat exploded. Message after message of furious insults flooded the screen, and the resentment practically felt like it was spilling out of people's phones. In the apocalypse, helpless rage was the cheapest emotion of all. The people outside nearly went cross-eyed with anger when they saw it. Some of them started cursing on the spot, swearing that since Chun Zhao refused the easy way, they'd kill him for it. After lunch, Chun Zhao decided to check out the pharmaceutical facility Lu Haifeng had mentioned. But the instant he stepped outside, a brutal wave of heat crashed over him. Before he could fully adjust to it, a kitchen knife came flying straight at him. Chun Zhao's eyes turned cold. He sidestepped cleanly and clenched his right fist at once. The group that had thrown the knife was already charging at him, screaming that if he wouldn't hand over the house, they'd take his life instead. In the next second, Chun Zhao flashed right in front of the lead man. In a single exchange, he snapped the man's wrist and stripped the knife from his hand in the same motion. The rest of the thugs rushed in like lunatics the moment they saw it. Chun Zhao simply swung the knife in his hand. In the blink of an eye, he left every one of them battered and slashed up. Seeing that Chun Zhao had no intention of stopping, the blonde thug tried to bluff his way through it and shouted, "It's broad daylight. You think you could just kill people? Everyone's watching." But that fake bravado collapsed under the weight of his own fear. Chun Zhao lowered the knife and looked at them with contempt. "Kill you? I'd be dirtying my hands for nothing. Besides, killing you outright would be letting you off too easy. In an apocalypse where a festering wound is basically a death sentence, leaving you alive like this is the cruelest punishment of all." Not long after, Chun Zhao arrived at the factory building in the western district that Lu Haifeng had mentioned. Along the way, he carefully destroyed every surveillance camera on his route. But the moment he pushed open the factory door, he accidentally inhaled an unknown toxic gas. By the time Chun Zhao realized he had walked into a trap, his body was already going weak and he could barely summon any strength at all. At that exact moment, he caught sight of two figures slowly approaching from behind. One of them stepped forward and injected him with a vial of medicine. Almost instantly, Chun Zhao's mind cleared and strength slowly began returning to his body. "Young man, feeling better now. That nerve gas won't kill you, but it's definitely not pleasant." Chun Zhao carefully studied the two people in front of him. Lu Haifeng had never mentioned that anyone was guarding this place. Had that old bastard set him up? Still, these two didn't seem openly hostile. Seeing his confusion, the man took the initiative to introduce himself. His name was Lin Guodong, a biomedical researcher. His work focused on human evolution under extreme environmental conditions, and he was also the person in charge here. The pink-haired girl beside him was a student, Su Rue. Then Lin Guodong said the gas outside is a necessary anti-theft measure. What I'm more curious about is the tool you used. That entry point is very unusual. Chun Xiao chose not to tell him anything about his powers. After thanking him, he smoothly shifted the conversation elsewhere. Lin Guodong then gave him a tour of the place. But the more Chun Xiao looked around, the more he felt this was far more than a simple pharmaceutical storage site. Lin Guodong told him he was free to take whatever medicine he needed as an apology for the security measures and also as a welcome gift. Chun Xiao didn't refuse the offer. Since collecting medicine had been his goal from the start anyway, he took almost every category he could find, stopping only when his backpack was full. He zipped the bag shut and turned back to thank him once more. Then, Chun Xiao left the facility without looking back. Only after he was gone did Lin Guodong stop, hiding that meaningful smile on his face. We'll meet again. By the time Chun Xiao returned home, cold sweat had already soaked through his body. Professor Lin had saved him and hadn't made things difficult for him, but the way that man looked at him still left his skin crawling. Just then, Chun Xiao noticed someone in the residence group desperately begging for antibiotics and anti-diarrheal medicine. He immediately replied that he happened to have a few boxes, but he wasn't selling. Just like that, he harvested another huge wave of emotion points. Afterward, Chun Xiao started sorting through the medicine he had collected. That was when he discovered that someone had planted a tracker in his backpack. Staring at the device, he couldn't figure out who had slipped it in or what had happened. Still, Chun Xiao didn't mind playing a little tracking game with whoever was behind it. So he attached the tracker to a stray cat and let it take his place in the game. Sitting in front of his computer, Lin Guodong looked completely baffled. What is this? Why is it moving like that? What the hell is he doing? With some free time on his hands, Chun Xiao started scrolling through the residence group chat and saw that someone was once again begging for medicine at an outrageous price over nothing more than a cold. But the one who caught his attention most was the young mother holding a child and practically begging to be kept. She claimed that if someone was willing to spare even a little clean water for her kid, then everything was negotiable. At this point, some of you watching might already feel sorry for her, but Chun Xiao looked at it with nothing but contempt. In his previous life, she had used this exact trick to get all kinds of benefits, and she had even conned him out of his deluxe instant noodles. Even so, people in the group still rushed to defend her. Too bad for them. Fake kindness and moral blackmail no longer worked on Xin Xiao. He immediately posted a video of Wang Wei moving supplies earlier that morning into the residence group chat, along with a caption saying that however much she had taken, he'd match it with double. On the other end of the screen, Wang Wei's heart dropped. She never imagined Chun Xiao had installed a camera in the hallway. She had been so careful, yet she had still been caught on video. She put her phone down and didn't dare keep reading. But the messages demanding that she share her supplies kept popping up one after another, leaving her no way to avoid them. Some people even showed up at Wang Wei's place carrying sticks and smashed her door lock apart with an axe. The starving look in their eyes scared Wang Wei so badly that she didn't dare move at all. All she could do was watch as the supplies she had worked so hard to stockpile were taken away. Meanwhile, that young mother also took advantage of the chaos to grab some of the drinking water for herself. By the time it was over, Wang Wei was covered in injuries and sat collapsed by the bed in a daze, deeply regretting her smug keyboard warrior behavior earlier that day. At the same time, the people who had gone to cause trouble for Chun Xiao the day before began dying off one after another. Yet instead of caring, the neighbors were only worried that the bodies might start to stink and spread disease. Then, to everyone's surprise, Lin Guodong suddenly appeared. Don't panic. Everyone, that we're a medical response team under the city's disease control center. We're here to help you. You've all suffered a lot. We came as soon as we received the order, but the roads were blocked, so we were still too late. He checked the eyes of one of the dead and said there was still time to handle it. But in this kind of extreme heat, the bodies to be professionally disposed of immediately, that if an outbreak started, the consequences would be catastrophic. After that, Lin Guodong handed out disinfectant tablets and basic medicines, instantly easing everyone's doubts about who he was. Some people even started saying the government really hadn't abandoned them after all. But Lin Guodong's true target was Chun Xiao. The tracking signal had gone haywire once it reached this area, which meant Chun Xiao had to be somewhere nearby and couldn't have gone far. At the same time, Chun Xiao also spotted Lin Guodong from a distance. Professor Lin. Why was he here? Was he really the one who had been tracking him all along? Just as Chun Xiao was thinking that over, his phone suddenly received a text message. The words on the screen were unmistakable. Be careful of Professor Lin. That only deepened the questions in his mind. If it wasn't just Professor Lin, then who else was secretly watching him? At the same time, Chun Xiao's gaze slowly shifted into the distance. A mysterious figure was staring fixedly in his direction. On the surface, Professor Lin looked like a doctor devoted to saving lives. But behind that mask, he felt more like a creep obsessed with tracking Chun Xiao's every move. What Chun Xiao hadn't expected was someone like that might not be the only one. The other party had even used a virtual number to hide their identity, leaving Chun Xiao unable to tell whether the warning had come from genuine concern or from someone trying to use him against Professor Lin. Not long after, Professor Lin had the corpses removed from the residential building, and many of the residents were deeply grateful to him. In weather like this, everyone knew bodies left too long would cause major trouble. Professor Lin smiled and said it was simply his duty. He also reminded everyone to watch out for heat stroke and to come to him anytime if they felt unwell. While Professor Lin was busy talking with the residents, Chun Xiao kept watching him closely, looking for anything suspicious. And a stain that looked a lot like blood caught his attention. Chun Xiao remembered that not long after the extreme heat began in his previous life, some areas had seen medical teams collecting blood samples from residents under the name of epidemic prevention. Soon after that, strong and healthy people had started disappearing without a trace. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Professor Lin posted a notice on the community board saying that in order to prevent heat stroke and the spread of related infectious diseases, a free health screening station would be set up starting the next day. IT would offer basic checkups, wound treatment, and nutritional supplements in parking garage number 3, and anyone who took part would also receive 1 bottle of water. Not long after, Professor Lin followed the tracking signal and found a stray cat, finally solving the mystery of the garbled location data. He gently stroked the well-fed cat, but the expression on his face twisted into something deeply unsettling as he muttered under his breath. So I've been discovered. Hidden in the shadows, Chun Xiao watched everything in silence and fully confirmed that Professor Lin was the one who had been tracking him. The next day, quite a few residents went to parking garage number 3 for the health check. But for most of them, treatment wasn't really the point. The real attraction was that bottle of water. And compared with the merciless sun outside, the underground garage did feel a lot cooler. Once enough people had gathered, Professor Lin had them line up in order and wait their turn. Hidden in the dark, Chun Xiao didn't notice anything obviously wrong at first. That changed the moment Professor Lin started drawing blood from the residents who came in for the checkup. Although Professor Lin said it was only a routine examination, Chun Xiao still couldn't stop himself from thinking of those medical teams from his previous life. What exactly was Professor Lin trying to do? Just then, someone suddenly shouted Professor Lin and came rushing out of the crowd in a panic. My brother's wound got infected. Please save him. Hearing that, Professor Lin calmly took out a vial. This is a new broad-spectrum enhancer. It speeds up wound healing and fights infection. With that, he injected the drug directly into Abu's infected wound and told him to rest for the next couple of days, saying the injury would heal soon. Abu still looked awful, but a faint vein had begun to bulge at his temple. Because of the distance, Chun Xiao didn't notice it, but he knew Professor Lin had to be observing something. So Chun Xiao chose to tell Abu and see what was really going on. Sure enough, not long after leaving, Abu suddenly dropped to his knees as if every bone in his body were being scorched alive. At the same time, blood-red veins rapidly spread across his arm. Then, as though he had completely lost his mind, a terrifying surge of energy began rising off his body. The companion beside him was startled by the sudden change and asked in a trembling voice what was wrong. But before he could finish, Abu clamped a hand around his throat. Have you lost your mind? Let go. I'm your boss, Zhang Chong. But Abu was already covered in red veins, clearly swallowed whole by negative emotion. Boss, when you shoved me out to take the blade for you, why didn't you remember you were my boss then? With that, he hurled Zhang Chong to the ground without the slightest mercy. But right then, Abu suddenly sensed a trace of danger. Chun Xiao slowly stepped out from the shadows wearing Jiahao Hai's uniform. The mutated Abu spotted him and immediately charged at Chun Xiao like a mad beast. What surprised Chun Xiao was that he actually had a focus to handle him. Abu's speed and strength had both increased by more than 3 times. But his joints were stiff and nearly all of his attacks came in straight lines. Every sign told Chun Shao this was not a normal drug reaction. Abu lunged at Chun Shao once again. Doopy, why now? Chun Shao had already learned everything he needed from him, so there was no reason to keep him alive any longer. Chun Shao immediately coated his palm with spatial severing and cleanly took Abu's head off in one smooth strike. Abu's head hit the ground with a thud, and at the corner of his eye, a tear of relief quietly slipped free. Not long after Chun Shao left, the sharp sound of footsteps echoed down the street. Under his breath, Professor Lin murmured that the serum had clearly contained nanobot trackers, so nothing should have gone wrong. Just moments ago, the signal had still been stable, but the instant he finished speaking, he froze in place. The mutant he had painstakingly created had already been killed. Professor Lin quickly suppressed his shock and calmly pulled out his medical tools to analyze the cause of death. The overactivation caused by the T7 prototype serum had indeed triggered neural collapse, but that was not the direct cause of death. Abu's fatal wound, Lu Haifeng's fatal injury, and even the cut marks left on that door lock the other day all shared the same trait. They were unnervingly clean. No visible weapon, no special equipment, yet cuts like that had been made. That was not something an ordinary person could possibly do. As he spoke, a strange smile slowly curled across Professor Lin's lips. The moment he first saw Chun Shao, he'd already felt there was something unusual about him. It seemed he had been right. Perhaps Chun Shao really did have the thing he had been searching for. Suddenly, a fit of coughing drew Professor Lin's attention, and he immediately went over to inspect Zhang Chong's injuries. One glance told him Zhang Chong was badly hurt, and it was likely bleeding in the lungs. But Zhang Chong barely cared about himself. Instead, he anxiously asked about Abu and urged Professor Lin to check on him first. With regret in his voice, Professor Lin told him what had happened to Abu. Then he took out a sketch of Chun Shao and asked whether Zhang Chong recognized him, saying that what happened to Abu was probably connected to that man. He pressed further, asking whether Zhang Chong knew where Chun Shao had gone. Only by finding him, he said, could they uncover the truth and prevent more people from getting hurt. Zhang Chong admitted he didn't know where Chun Shao had gone, but he didn't know where Chun Shao lived and said he could tell him. A nearly invisible smile touched Professor Lin's lips, though his voice remained gentle. He told Zhang Chong not to worry, and said the priority now was immediate professional treatment. He explained that his lab had the best equipment available and that Zhang Chong should go there first to recover. Filled with gratitude, Zhang Chong thanked him and followed him to the lab. On the way, Zhang Chong still couldn't hold back. Professor, I'm really sorry to trouble you, but Abu, how did he end up like that? He was fine just a moment ago. Right after he got that injection from you. He barely took 2 steps before he could finish. Zhang Chong suddenly felt that something was off. As suspicion quietly began to rise in his chest, Professor Lin kept his tone perfectly steady. Extreme rejection reactions to the serum are rare, but not impossible, so we'll run a full examination and make sure you receive the best treatment available. Zhang Chong stopped at the entrance to the lab, still hesitating in the end. Professor, how about I just go home and recover there? Just give me some antibiotics. Professor Lin acted as if he hadn't heard a word. He swiped open the access door and said coldly, for the sake of science and for your own sake, stay quiet. With that, he signaled the lab staff forward and they shoved Zhang Chong inside without the slightest bit of mercy. The heavy lab door slammed shut with a bang, and before long, chilling screams began echoing from inside. At the same time, Chun Shao was lying on his couch, silently thinking over what Professor Lin was really after. Then, out of nowhere, the video intercom at the door lit up. Professor Lin's voice came through the speaker. Chun Shao, it's Professor Lin. Mind if we talk? That mad scientist was standing right outside his door. So you really do live here? Chun Shao. Sorry for bothering you this late. After saying that, Professor Lin gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. Standing in the living room, Chun Shao met his gaze. Professor Lin, showing up this late, is there something you need? Professor Lin looked perfectly calm. I heard you live here, so I thought I'd stop by and see you. Naturally, Chun Shao didn't buy that excuse for a second, but since the man had come to him on his own, Chun Shao didn't mind playing along. He casually told Professor Lin to have a seat. Looking around the room, Professor Lin said meaningfully, this place is unusual, that double-layer heat-insulated glass, an independent water circulation system. This doesn't look like an ordinary house. That IT looks more like an apocalypse shelter. Could it be that you already knew this extreme heat disaster was coming? Chun Shao answered with an easy joke. I bought the renovation package during last year's Singles Day sale. The contractor said it would last 50 years. I thought he was exaggerating, but maybe the guy was a prophet after all. Professor Lin smiled faintly. Interesting, but Chun Xiao, the real reason I came tonight is that I want to ask you about something. Your neighbor Abu is dead and Lu Haifeng died not long ago too. I examined both of their bodies that in both cases, the cervical spine was severed instantly and the cut was as smooth as laser surgery. And Lu Haifeng's wound was the same that a cut like that is beyond ordinary blades. Honestly, even military weapons might not pull it off so cleanly. Hearing that, Chun Xiao deliberately put on the face of someone listening to juicy gossip. Don't tell me the murder weapon came from the same manufacturer? Professor Lin, if you ever figure it out, you should definitely recommend it to me. It was as if Professor Lin thought he was finally about to catch him slipping and he pressed immediately. And what exactly would you use it for? Chun Xiao didn't even blink. To cut steak, obviously, didn't weather like this. The fridge isn't stable and meat goes tough fast at a good blade makes all the difference. Professor Lin's probing hit a dead end and a visibly speechless look crossed his face. Even so, he slowly continued. No matter how you look at it, both men were probably killed by the same person and whoever did it used methods so precise and professional that this was clearly no ordinary man. Xian Zhao's expression instantly turned cold. Maybe they were just unlucky and messed with something they never should have touched. A calculating glint flashed through Professor Lin's eyes like he had finally found an opening. And yet, I heard both of them had conflicts with you. The moment those words landed, the temperature in the room seemed to drop to freezing. Chun Xiao only gave a faint smile. Professor Lin, you've got quite the imagination that I'm just an ordinary guy. What could I possibly do? But then again, showing up at my place in the middle of the night with a medical kit. Don't tell me you think I'm about to die too. Besides, I don't remember ever telling you where I live. Oh, how exactly did you find me? Professor Lin answered by pulling up a piece of footage. You recognize this man, don't you? He's the one who told me you lived here. Sun Zhao's eyes darkened slightly. Zhang Chong really was tough enough to keep hanging on. Too bad falling into the hands of that old fox was probably worse than death. So he asked, and how is he now? Professor Lin answered in a calm voice. He's adapting to a new treatment. Under extreme heat, the human body evolves. He's simply progressing faster than most. That answer set off alarms in Chun Zhao's mind. Was Professor Lin really running human experiments? And more importantly, what exactly had brought him here tonight? At that exact moment, the footage showed Zhang Chong suddenly mutating. He tore free from every medical restraint on his body, his vital signs spiking violently as one value flashed red. Genetic mutation rate 37%. Then Professor Lin slid a syringe toward Qin Xiao. This is an immune enhancer I developed. It protects against multiple pathogens in high-temperature environments, and it has no side effects. Looking straight at Qin Xiao, Professor Lin said slowly, I know you're not ordinary. The heat will continue. The world will change. The survival rate for normal people won't even reach 10%. But some people will evolve first. Chun Xiao gave him a mocking look. Evolved like Zhang Chong? Professor Lin's face, that is a necessary cost. Scientific progress always requires someone to go first. You carry a far more stable evolutionary trait. We could work together and find a way for humanity to adapt to the new world. Qin Xiao answered lightly, no need. Part of him actually wanted to see what Professor Lin would look like once he realized he'd been rejected. Sure enough, Professor Lin's face darkened. You don't have to refuse so quickly. The heat will continue. Infectious diseases will spread. Mutated life forms are only going to appear one after another. Work with me and this knowledge. This technology will keep you alive longer. Time is running out for everyone that if you change your mind, the doors of my laboratory will always be open to you. By the time he turned to leave, Professor Lin's expression had turned thoroughly ugly. Though his thoughts remained ice-cold and precise. Sun Zhao's mental stability was extraordinary and his defensive awareness was on an entirely different level. Clearly, he was no ordinary human. Compared with raw genetic data, a living specimen was worth far more. Qin Xiao, you won't escape me. Chun Xiao lowered his eyes to the syringe Professor Lin had left behind and almost laughed. He really had wrapped live human experimentation in the language of noble science. If Chun Xiao didn't get rid of him soon, peace wouldn't last much longer. Since Professor Lin was so obsessed with studying evolution, Chun Xiao would let him see with his own eyes what true evolution actually looked like. And the mutant standing before him was Professor Lin's very first masterpiece. Vital signs stable. Adrenaline levels have crossed the threshold. Mutation process complete. Rational cognition signal has dropped to 0. Gripping the lab equipment in excitement, Professor Lin muttered success. Hatred, fear, pain, they really are the perfect catalyst. Zhang Chong, you've been reborn. Now go complete your first mission. Bring Chun Xiao back to me alive. Seeing that, Su Rui asked in confusion, using living people to create monsters. Is this really the path of human evolution you've always talked about? Professor Lin didn't answer her directly. Instead, he asked calmly, this is your first time taking part in an experiment since entering the program. How does it feel? As he spoke, he told her to complete the final step of the procedure. Su Rui was clearly resisting. Professor, this is human experimentation that you've already crossed the ethical line. But Professor Lin remained calm. Ethics, suerui. When the apocalypse comes, morality becomes a luxury. His sacrifice may buy more people a chance to survive. After saying that, he personally opened the lab door. Zhang Chang, go now. Bring Chun Xiao back. Growling low in his throat, Zhang Chang stared at the open doorway, then bolted out like a beast that had finally broken its cage. It didn't take long before he reached Chuanzhou's neighborhood. But when he forced his way inside, the house was completely empty. Just then, Zhang Chang caught a familiar scent and whipped his head around. Not far behind him, Chun Xiao was leaning under a tree in the shade and said with a mocking grin, well, Zhang Chang got so it really is you've got a few days apart and you've turned into quite a sight. So tell me, should I keep calling you Zhang Chong or should I just start calling you Wang Kai? Zhang Chong roared and lunged at him, forcing the words out in broken bursts. Chun, should I? The moment those words came out, the emotional fluctuation around him spiked even harder. The harvesting efficiency jumped by more than 30%. Interesting. Backing away as he spoke, Chun Xiao said, come on down. Let's move somewhere with a little more room. I'm not fighting you on my doorstep. Forget disturbing the neighbors. If you wreck my safe house, you can't afford to pay for it. With that, he drew Zhang Chong all the way down into the underground parking garage. In the next instant, Chun Xiao flashed in front of him and said coldly, now try a taste of my spatial severing. But to his surprise, the strike landed and Zhang Chong came out completely unharmed. Chun Xiao was genuinely startled. He hadn't expected the guy's hide to harden to this level. Grinding out Chun Xiao's name through clenched teeth, Zhang Chong was clearly trying to catch him during the recovery window after an attack and pin him down in one move. Too bad Chun Xiao still held the absolute edge in speed. While dodging, Chun Xiao didn't stop taunting him. Zhang Chong, you were always all brawn and no brains. You can't even speak like a human anymore. And seriously, your new look is ugly as hell. Professor Lin's taste is terrible. Maybe next time I'll introduce you to a decent barber. Unable to catch Chun Xiao no matter how hard he chased, Zhang Chong was left with nothing but impotent rage. But then, all of a sudden, he stopped pursuing. The fury inside him began multiplying by the second, and the already grotesque muscles on his back started writhing and mutating even further. Alarm bells instantly went off in Chun Xiao's head. But before he could fully react, he turned for just a moment and Zhang Chong was gone. Sensing that something was wrong, Chun Xiao whipped around and saw Zhang Chong roaring as he appeared behind him. Sharp bone spikes still shooting out from his body. Chun Xiao instantly shifted into a defensive stance and retreated at speed. Even so, one of the spikes still struck a vital spot. In the surveillance room, Professor Lin burst into laughter. Second stage mutation, an emotional surge, can actually trigger a morphological mutation too. Su Rui, record all the data. But Su Rui's heart was already wavering. Was this really the path that would save humanity? Earlier, Shan Xiao had only meant to provoke Zhang Chong and harvest emotion points. Instead, he had pushed the mutation even further. Zhang Chong had turned into a monster covered in bone spikes, and those spikes had already left Chun Xiao badly wounded. Zhang Chong gave him no time to recover. After mutating, his powerful body came crashing forward like a shell, and Chen Xiao instinctively threw up both arms to block. The force of that attack was far beyond what Chen Xiao expected. His heart jolted, and he immediately shifted his weight, trying to slip away to the side. What he didn't expect was that Zhang Chang's post-mutation reaction speed had become this fast. The instant Chen Xiao moved aside, those razor-sharp claws were already ripping toward him with a violent rush of air. Even then, the system panel still showed Zhang Chong's stats continuing to rise. At the same time, Chun Zhao's skill, spatial severing, was finally close to meeting its upgrade condition, the SO. He opened his mouth again and mocked Zhang Chong, saying he looked ridiculous now like some oversized hedgehog. As expected, mutated Zhang Chong was ready to blow up at the slightest provocation. And Qin Xiao had no intention of stopping there. Back when you were collecting protection money in the old district, at least you still had the guts to swing a steel pipe in a real fight. Now you've taken a few injections, grown a bunch of bones, and suddenly you think you're somebody? That damn Dr. Lin tells you who to bite and you go bite them, so what are you if not a dog? Watching the emotion points spilling off Zhang Chong nonstop, Chun Xiao couldn't help letting a smile curl at the corner of mouth. But he wasn't the only one pleased that Professor Lin's eyes. The emotional peak had just broken past the threshold and Zhang Chong's bone density had risen another 5%. To him, Chun Xiao was practically a gift from heaven for helping push Zhang Chong further. While Su Rue, at his side, still couldn't understand why Chun Xiao was doing any of this. Right then, Zhang Chong finally completed another round of mutation and every bone spike on his body turned blood red. One spike after another shot wildly out from his flesh. Xian Xiao, however, stayed completely at ease that he moved with nimble precision, dodging each deadly spike while continuing to provoke Zhang Chong with his words. At last, the negative emotion points he had gathered reached the threshold for a skill evolution. The moment Zhang Chong exposed an opening, Chun Xiao activated Spatial Rift Annihilation. The bone spikes Zhang Chong fired were instantly swallowed by off Zhang Chan's body and said coldly into it, "Your test subject's kind of disappointing. Next time, send me one that can actually fight." The veins on Professor Lin's forehead immediately bulged. But what filled him wasn't anger, it was pure hunger for a perfect specimen. "But very good. Chun Xiao, you really are different." Chun Xiao only replied flatly that he had simply done Zhang Chong the favor of giving him a proper end considering they had once been neighbors. But just then, footsteps sounded from behind him that a stranger slowly approached while clapping, saying, "Impressive. Really impressive." The mysterious man who had only dared contact Chun Xiao through secret text before was now standing openly in front of him. Chun Xiao immediately became wary of Chun Shixing's sudden appearance because it was obvious the man had watched the entire fight with Zhang Chong from start to finish. As if he sensed the tension in the air, Chun Shixing spoke first. "That fight just now was impressive. Just as I thought, this may be an age of despair, but it'll also be the age when gods begin to rise." Chun Xiao could vaguely hear the deeper meaning in those words. But by all logic, at this point in time, aside from himself and Professor Lin, no one else should know that powers even existed. He quietly began gathering spatial energy, ready to fight or retreat at a moment's notice. But Chun Shixing paid no attention to his subtle movement and said calmly, "With the precision and destructive force of your ability, there's no way you're some unfinished product Lin Guodong made." Hearing that, Chun Xiao became even more guarded and started suspecting even more strongly that Chun Shixing might be one of Professor Lin's people. But the next thing Chun Shixing said wiped that suspicion away because he turned out to be the same person who had texted Chun Xiao earlier and warned him to stay away from Professor Lin. At that moment, the only thing Chun Shixing still couldn't figure out was how Chun Shixing had gotten his number in the first place. Chun Shixing let out a quiet laugh and said bluntly that in an apocalypse where the old rules were already falling apart, tracing a phone number was almost effortless. Besides, the ARC group he belonged had its own intelligence network. "My name is Chun Shixing that I'm here on behalf of ARC to invite you to join us. We can offer you real help." But to Chun Xiao, the so-called ARC organization didn't matter much at all. What truly mattered was the fact that ability users had started appearing earlier in his life. Even so, Chun Shixing kept going on and on about the benefits of joining ARC, until Chun Xiao finally followed his lead and asked, "So what exactly is ARC?" Chun Shixing answered calmly, "ARC is an organization to finding awakened individuals that we believe the world is about to undergo a massive transformation and only true elites deserve to board the arc of a new age. And you clearly qualify. Chun Xiao, I can offer you things Linguadong never could. We can make you stronger. Not through grotesque mutation, but by letting you keep your reason, control your power, and step onto a true path of ascension beyond ordinary humanity." The moment he heard that, Chun Xiao understood as, oh, that was it. ARC was just another nest of fanatics. The world might have changed, but he was still the kind of person who didn't believe in gods, demons, or any holy doctrine. And more than anything, Chun Xiao hated having other people decide his path for him. Whether it was a complete madman like Lin Guodong or a self-proclaimed elite hypocrite like Chun Shixing, he wasn't choosing either of them. "I walk my own road, that I'm used to standing alone, that I don't need anyone teaching me how to live, and I definitely don't need to join some art group. Instead of getting angry at the rejection, Chen Shixing seemed to admire Chen Xiao even more. He stopped trying to persuade him and simply turned to leave, offering only one final reminder. In a world on the brink of collapse, savage growth might keep someone alive for a while, but not forever. The day you realize that one person's strength has limits, arch doors will still be open to you. With that, Chen Shixing's figure slowly faded away. Watching the traces he left behind, Chen Shixing thought to himself that none of that was really Chen Shixing's concern. Still, it was interesting. The man had looked emotionally stable, yet he had still contributed quite a bit of negative emotion. As for the so-called limit Chen Shixing talked about, Chen Xiao would prove with his own actions that it wasn't some final wall at all. It was only the starting line beneath his feet. But before that, it was time to finally put an end to this whole farce with Professor Lin. To bring that mess to a close, Chen Xiao personally broke into Professor Lin's laboratory. And there, he saw something he would never forget for the rest of his life. This was Lin Guodong's vision of scientific progress, disgusting to the core. While Chen Xiao was still thinking, Professor Lin slowly stepped into view. He wasn't surprised to see Chen Xiao here at all. The eye in his eyes, a perfect specimen like Chen Xiao could never settle for an ordinary life. So Zhang Chong really did lose. Still, if he managed to bring you here, then at least his death had some value. What is it? Have you finally made up your mind? Ready to devote yourself to the great evolution of mankind? As for Chen Shixing and that so-called arc of his, they're nothing but hypocrites dressed up in holy robes. Listen carefully. Chen Xiao. Every step of human progress has been built on corpses and rivers of blood. Your ability is a heaven-given treasure. It shouldn't be wasted on the petty concerns of ordinary people. Professor Lin kept rambling on, completely oblivious to the open disgust on Chen Xiao's face. Only when he had finally heard enough did Chen Xiao cut in coldly, "Done talking yet? What the hell does humanity's progress have to do with me? I didn't care enough to bother with your nonsense before, but you really shouldn't have disturbed my peace." As the words left his mouth, Chen Xiao quietly activated his spatial ability and attacked Professor Lin without hesitation. "So I'm just gonna have to erase you." But Professor Lin calmly pressed the button. "Chen Xiao, you really are too young if I let you come in here. Then of course I already had a way to keep you. After your fight with Zhang Chong, how much strength do you really have left? Why not just behave and stay with me? It'll save you a lot of pain." Chen Xiao answered with a single cold word, "No." Hearing that, Professor Lin immediately pressed the button again. "Then there's only one ending left for you." The instant he finished speaking, the glass containers all across the lab exploded. Chen quickly raised an arm to shield himself. When he forced his eyes open again, he saw a whole pack of mutated humans roaring as they lunged at him. At current level, he wasn't afraid of the mutants Professor Lin had cultivated. The problem was their numbers and the way their attack patterns overlapped chaotically. Before long, one failed dodge was enough for his right arm to take a heavy hit. Seeing that, Professor Lin burst in a triumphant laughter. "Stay here. Chen Xiao, I'll make you even stronger." Chen Xiao only sneered. "You think a few brainless freaks are enough to keep me here? While fighting them, I already figured out their attack pattern. The physical stats are strong, sure, but their movements are stiff. Their flexibility is terrible." It didn't take long before Chen Xiao found an opening and wiped out the entire group with a single strike of spatial annihilation. "I thought you'd have something more impressive than this. You really thought 3 monsters would be enough to hold me? Professor Lin, you're the naive one that you've lived 40 or 50 years for nothing." As he spoke, Chen Xiao strode toward Professor Lin with killing intent rolling off him. Looking at the fear on the man's face, he didn't hesitate for even a second point. One spatial slash tore straight through Professor Lin's throat. Clutching at his neck, Professor Lin forced out a ragged sound. "Hitch, Chen Xiao, you really are impressive. But all the data on the mutation serum has already been sent out. The seeds have been planted. This world is only going to get more interesting." Those words stuck with Chen Xiao, but in his current condition, getting back to the shelter for treatment came first. Just then, Professor Lin's assistant, Su Rui, suddenly called out to him. "If you try to walk back like that, you won't make it home. Relax. I'm not here to hurt you." As she said that, she stepped closer holding a restorative fluid saying it could stop the bleeding fast and stabilize his injuries. Sun Xiao had just killed the professor she admired so deeply. Yet, Su Rui not only made no move to avenge him, she even handed over all the research supplies he had left behind. It turned out that ever since she learned her teacher had been conducting human experiments, guilt had been eating at her nonstop. Handing over those supplies was the only way she could lighten that burden even a little. Even so, Chun Xiao remained wary of her. He didn't even dare use the treatment she offered right away. After all, he had just killed the man she once worshipped. Su Rui had clearly expected that response. It makes sense that you don't trust me. But there are things here you might need. If you still have the strength, come with me. Half suspicious, Chen Xiao followed her to a storage room packed with rare medicines that could never be found outside. My teacher knew the heat wouldn't go away. All of this was stockpiled for himself. He liked to talk about sacrificing himself for science, but the truth is he was more afraid of death than anyone that he doesn't need this stuff anymore. And I'm leaving too. Take whatever you need. Consider it my apology in his place. I applied to become his graduate student because he used to be the kind of scientist I truly respected. That it was only recently that I learned he'd been conducting human experiments. I may not have participated directly, but I still became an accomplice. I'm going north to another research institute to keep doing the work I should be doing. If I stay alive, I want to create a real cure someday, not a poison that turns people into monsters. Chun Xiao watched Su Rui walk away without saying a word. Having lived through this world once already, he had no desire left to untangle anyone else's moral knots. The only thing he wanted was to live comfortably in this apocalypse. After stripping the place of every useful supply Professor Lin had left behind, Chun Xiao set the entire facility ablaze. Meanwhile, the global heat wave continued to worsen. The average outside temperature had already surged to 58 degrees Celsius. The Global Meteorological Bureau issued another red-level heat alert. Permafrost had fully melted, massive amounts of methane were being released, and experts warned that the greenhouse effect had entered an irreversible death spiral. After seeing that, Chun Xiao turned off the display. The outside world was only going to get harsher. Supplies were still enough for now, but his negative emotion points were running dangerously low. Fortunately, water had now become real hard currency, which meant it was the perfect time to collect a little emotional tax. So Qin Xiao contacted Mu Sang immediately. The two of them quickly arranged to meet a buyer at a hidden location. It didn't take long before a figure came hurrying over. This buyer looked like the ruthless type, and he wasted no time showing what he had brought. Chun Xiao gave it a glance and said flatly, "Under normal circumstances, this would be worth 2 bottles. But do I look like the kind of guy who deals in fairness? Today you get 1. The second those words landed, the man's anger shot through the roof. Seeing that, Chun Xiao pressed even harder, mad already. Then the price just changed again. "Still 1 bottle, but first you say this, Brother Xiao. You're such a saint." The man refused to say it for a long time. Only after Chun Xiao warned him that waiting any longer would make the price even worse did he finally grit his teeth and spit the words out. Chun Xiao nodded in satisfaction. "Good boy. Next time, bring more. Maybe then I'll let you trade for more than half a bottle." On the way back from a deal, Chun Xiao ran into Old Man Wang. "Old Wang, why are you still out this late instead of resting?" That was when he learned that Aunt Lu Yuan from the neighboring complex was raising her grandson alone, and the boy had suffered heat stroke. With the constant water and power outages, she couldn't manage on her own. So Old Man Wang was taking her some water. Chun Xiao warned him that in times like these, water was getting more valuable by the day and taking care of himself should come first. But Old Man Wang clearly didn't take it to heart. He only sighed and said, "I know what you mean, but I'm old enough already that I just can't stand seeing a child suffer." With that, he delivered the bottle of water to Lu Yun's home and repeatedly urged her to make sure the boy drank it right away. But the moment he left, Lu Yun started cursing in her heart. That old bastard took forever and only brought 1 bottle. Embarrassing. Tomorrow I'll cry a little harder and maybe I can trick another one out of him. What made it even colder was that she hadn't wanted the water to save her grandson at all. She walked over and gently knocked on a tightly shut door. A man in a white lab coat came out almost immediately. Luan instantly switched to a meek obedient expression and said softly, "Mr. Zhao, this is today's